Welcome to Duo Reads, where we decode deep ideas and break down big books one page at a time. Today, we're exploring Mark Manson's wildly popular book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. If you ever felt, overwhelmed by the constant pressure to be positive, happy, and perfect, this book is like a refreshing splash of cold water. It really challenges almost everything conventional self-help tells you. It flips the script on what it means to live a good life.
It really does. And our mission today really is to dig into the big ideas from the first few chapters. We're going to look at how our choices, like what we value, what we decide to actually care about, how that profoundly shapes our experiences and, ultimately the quality of our lives. It's sort of a call to get real about our problems, maybe even embrace them instead of constantly running away.
Okay, so let's start where Manson does. He uses this really fascinating, counterintuitive story about the writer Charles Bukowski. You might know Bukowski, the literary legend, but honestly, by his own words, he was an alcoholic, a womanizer, a chronic gambler, a lout, a cheapskate, a deadbeat, and on his worst days, a poet. That's a quote. He spent decades getting rejection slips, working this soul-crushing job, filing letters at a post office, barely surviving. Then at 50 years old, he finally gets his first real shot with a small publisher, and he writes his first novel, Post Office, in just 3 weeks. Crazy.
Yeah, it sounds like the classic American dream story, doesn't it? The guy who never gave up, persisted against all odds, finally made it. That's how we usually see success.
Right.
But here's the twist, the real kicker. Bukowski's tombstone. It reads, "Don't try." And Manson's take isn't that he was apathetic or gave up. It's about, radical self-acceptance. Bukowski succeeded because he accepted himself maybe as a loser by society's standards and just wrote honestly from that place. He wasn't trying to be something he wasn't.
That really does flip things around. It immediately pushes back against our culture's obsession with what Manson calls these unrealistically positive expectations.
Yeah.
That constant message, be happier, be healthier, be the best. It's just everywhere. Manson argues this endless striving only reminds us of what we aren't, what we feel we lack. It's like, a truly happy person doesn't need to stand in front of a mirror and say, I'm happy. They just are. What's your take on how intense that pressure feels today?
Oh, it's incredibly intense. And it leads right into what Manson calls the feedback loop from hell. Think about it like this. You feel anxious. Okay, normal enough. But then you start feeling anxious about being anxious.
Oh, yeah, been there.
Or you get angry, and then you get angry at yourself for being angry. Yeah. Society, especially with, consumer culture and perfectly curated social media feeds, bombards us with these images of ideal lives. Yeah. It makes us think that normal negative feelings, anxiety, fear, guilt, are somehow not okay, which just makes everything worse. It's like a self-inflicted cycle.
It really is a vicious cycle, feeling bad about feeling bad. But Manson pushes this even further with something he calls the backwards law. It sounds paradoxical, but it's key. He says, and I'm quoting here, wanting positive experience is a negative experience. And paradoxically, the acceptance of one's negative experience is itself a positive experience. He uses this analogy like tripping on acid and trying to walk towards a house. But the harder you try, the farther away it seems to get. It's like constantly chasing happiness makes us less satisfied because it just keeps reminding us that we think we lack it right now.
Right. It shines a light on this big irony of our modern lives, especially these first world problems. We have more stuff, more opportunities than ever before, materially speaking. Yet you see stress, anxiety, depression rates just soaring. Our crisis isn't really material anymore. It feels more existential. We have so much, maybe we don't even know what to genuinely care about. And seeing infinite possibilities of better just makes us feel like we're never quite good enough.
Yeah, that really resonates. What stands out to me is how we get caught thinking happiness is some destination. I'll be happy when. Right. But Manson suggests it's more of an ongoing process, a continuous engagement with life, problems, and all. And that leads us right into his next big idea, the usefulness of suffering and choosing your struggles. He introduces this conceptual superhero to explain it, calls him Disappointment Panda.
Disappointment Panda, yes. The hero nobody wants, but maybe everyone needs. His superpower. Yeah. Telling people the harsh truths about themselves that they needed to hear but didn't want to accept. Brutal but necessary.
Okay.
And the first truth he'd probably hit us with is that we suffer for the simple reason that suffering is biologically useful. He says it is nature's preferred agent for inspiring change. Think about stubbing your toe. That sharp physical pain, it's instant feedback. Don't walk into that table again.
Right.
Simple. Well, the same idea applies to psychological pain. Rejection, failure. These are signals. They teach us, hopefully, to avoid the same mistakes. They prompt growth.
So this idea of a life with absolutely no problems, it's not just unrealistic, it's actually Maybe not even good for us. Disappointment Panda says, problems never freaking go away. They just improve. I love that line.
It's great, isn't it?
Warren Buffett has money problems, sure, but they're definitely better problems than someone facing homelessness. So happiness isn't about avoiding problems. It's about solving them. It's active. It's dynamic, not some passive state you just arrive at.
Exactly. And Manson points out two main ways people fail at this. One is denial, just pretending the problem isn't there, distracting yourself. The other is playing the victim, blaming everyone else, feeling powerless. Both might give you a sort of quick high, a temporary escape from the pain, but long term, they lead to misery, anger, helplessness, and this connects back to our emotions. Manson sees them as feedback mechanisms, biological signals trying to nudge you towards beneficial change. Negative emotions, they're basically a call to action. If you feel bad, your brain might be saying, hey, there's an unaddressed problem here.
But we often just push those negative feelings down, don't we? Or we get stuck spinning our wheels in them. And the flip side, always chasing positive feelings, that doesn't work either because they just don't last. It's that whole hedonic treadmill idea, right? We adapt.
Precisely. You get the promotion, you're thrilled for a bit then. It's just your job again. Your baseline happiness doesn't really shift long term.
We work so hard to change things, but often end up feeling pretty much the same. Never quite satisfied.
Exactly. And that's why Manson flips the question. It's not what do you want to enjoy? The real question is, what pain do you want to sustain? Because genuine happiness requires struggle. It literally grows out of solving problems. Real fulfillment comes from choosing your struggles and actively managing them. Want a great relationship? You have to sustain the risk of rejection, the messiness of intimacy. Want a great career? You got to sustain the long hours, the failures, the uncertainty.
Choosing your struggle. It's such a core idea. Manson tells his story about himself wanting to be a rock star. He daydreamed about the crowds, the fame, being on stage.
The result.
Exactly, the result. But he realized he didn't love the process. The hours of practice, lugging gear, booking tiny gigs, facing rejection constantly. The daily grind. He concludes, who you are is defined by what you're willing to struggle for. If you don't embrace the struggle part, you probably won't get the result you want. And even if you did, it might feel hollow.
It's a really clarifying question, isn't it? What struggle are you willing to put up with? It helps sort out real passions from just like pleasant fantasies. And this leads into another area Manson tackles, this myth of exceptionalism and why maybe being average isn't so bad after all. He uses this character, Jimmy, who is like all positivity all the time.
Oh yeah, Jimmy.
This delusional startup guy, always hyping his ideas, but actually just mooching off people, totally convinced of his own brilliance despite, zero evidence.
And Manson really goes after the whole self-esteem movement here. He argues that telling everyone they're special and exceptional just creates more Jimmys. True self-worth, he suggests, isn't about how great you feel about your positive qualities. It's about how you feel about your negative ones, and if you're willing to honestly work on them.
Right. Jimmy's delusion made him weak because he never faced his flaws. He couldn't improve. And this ties into what Manson calls the tyranny of exceptionalism. Think about it. Mass media floods us with the extremes. The billionaires, the superstars, the prodigies, the worst disasters.
And you only see the outliers.
Exactly. So just being average starts to feel like failure. And that pressure makes people either act entitled, like Jimmy, or turn to addictions to cope. But the reality is, most of us are pretty average at most things we do. That's just statistics. That's normal.
The real danger is buying into the idea that your life only has value if it's somehow notable and great. That just sets most people up to feel worthless. But Manson offers this liberating twist. Truly exceptional people, they're often obsessed with improvement precisely because they don't think they're already great. They see themselves as mediocre or average and believe they could be better.
It's an anti-entitlement mindset. It's about, as he puts it, eating your veggies, accepting the bland and mundane truths of life.
Like what?
Like, your actions actually don't matter that much in the grand scheme of things. Ouch. Or, the vast majority of your life will be boring and not noteworthy, and that's okay.
Okay, that sounds kind of depressing at first glance.
But it's actually freeing. It lifts that insane pressure to be amazing 24/7. It lets you actually appreciate the simple stuff. Basic experiences like friendship, learning something new, having a laugh. Those ordinary things are often where the real value lies.
That's a huge perspective shift.
Yeah.
And getting there often starts with real self-awareness. Manson uses this great analogy, the self-awareness onion. Peeling back the layers makes you cry.
Ah, yes.
The first layer is just understanding your emotions. This makes me happy, this makes me sad. Seems simple, but Many of us aren't even great at that.
Yeah.
The second layer is asking why you feel that way.
Yeah.
What's the underlying cause? That helps you see what you're measuring as success or failure.
Right. But the deepest layer, the really tough one, is getting down to your personal values. Asking, why do I even consider this a success or failure? What yardstick am I using to measure myself? If your core values are kind of messed up, or shitty values, as Manson calls them, then your thoughts and feelings are going to be out of whack too. He gives this example, like getting upset when his brother doesn't text back quickly. He digs down and realizes the value is wanting a good relationship, but the metric he's using is, how often do we text? Maybe that metric is flawed, right? It's causing unnecessary pain.
These flawed metrics and values are really highlighted in the stories he tells about musicians. Dave Mustaine from Megadeth and Pete Best, the original Beatles drummer. Mustaine got kicked out of Metallica right before they blew up. He went on to form Megadeth, sold millions of records, became a metal icon, huge success by any objective measure.
Totally.
But he admitted years later he still felt like a failure. Why? Because his internal metric was always be bigger than Metallica. He could never win by that standard.
Wow. And contrast that with Pete Best, also kicked out of the Beatles just before they hit it big. Obviously devastating at the time, went through a rough patch. But years later, Best said he was actually happier than he thought he would have been with the Beatles. His values shifted. He found happiness in family, a simpler, stable life. He changed his definition of success.
Those stories really drive it home.
Yeah.
If you want to change how you see your problems, you have to change what you value and enter how you measure failure success.
Absolutely.
So Manson lists some common shitty values that tend to create bad problems. Things like pleasure, which he says is a result of good things, not a cause in itself.
Right. Or material success beyond basic needs, the link to happiness gets pretty weak.
Always needing to be right, that shuts down learning. And relentlessly staying positive, which can just be denial.
He argues that genuine happiness and success are really just side effects of having good values. Solid values lead to better problems, which leads to a better life.
And this all seems to hinge on the idea that you are always choosing. He brings in William James, the father of American psychology. James had a tough life, illness, failures. He decided to try an experiment for 1 year. Act as if he were 100% responsible for everything that occurred in his life.
And that experiment basically saved him. It became his rebirth, the key insight. We don't always control what happens to us, but we always control how we interpret what happens to us as well as how we respond.
Okay, so that's the critical difference between fault and responsibility.
Exactly. Fault is about the past, who caused it. Responsibility is about the present, how you choose to deal with it now.
You might not be at fault for something bad happening, like someone hurting you.
Right. But you are responsible for how you manage the aftermath. Your emotions, your choices moving forward. That's always on you.
Manson uses his own breakup story. His first girlfriend cheated. Clearly her fault. But he realized he was responsible for his own resulting misery and for healing and improving himself, not just blaming her forever.
It's empowering, really. It stops you from being stuck. And it pushes back against what Manson sees as a trend, especially online, of victimhood chic or outrage porn.
Yeah, where people seem to gain attention or feel morally superior by constantly highlighting how they've been wronged, sometimes over minor things.
Right. It kind of distracts from real issues and promotes blame over solutions. Manson argues that part of living in a free society is learning to deal with people and ideas you don't like. Taking responsibility means valuing things like honesty and being open to being wrong, rather than needing certainty.
Speaking of certainty, he talks about the dangers of pure certainty.
Yeah, he says it's basically impossible to achieve, and trying just makes you more insecure. Plus, being absolutely certain you're right can justify some really bad behavior.
He tells that wild story about Erin, the self-improvement junkie, totally convinced she was destined to cure death with him. Her certainty was scary.
His point is that uncertainty is the root of all progress and all growth. The more okay you are with not knowing, the more open you are to learning, to seeing things differently, to changing your mind. Admitting your beliefs might be wrong is crucial for evolving.
Which connects to Manson's law of avoidance. We tend to avoid things that threaten our sense of identity or our core values. He mentions a friend who wanted to be an artist, but never actually showed his work. Why? Because the potential of being judged as a bad artist felt worse than just remaining unknown.
Yeah, or the friend stuck being the party guy because he was terrified of who he'd be without that identity.
So Manson's advice is pretty radical. Don't find yourself, never know who you are.
Sounds weird, right?
Yeah, but the idea is that clinging to a fixed identity keeps you stuck. Not knowing keeps you striving, discovering, growing. It frees you up.
It keeps you moving. And that leads right into the do something principle. Most of us think it goes. Motivation, inspiration, action. We wait to feel motivated before we do anything.
Right, waiting for the muse to strike.
But Manson flips it based on advice from his old math teacher, Mr. Packwood. The teacher said, if you're stuck on a problem, don't just sit there, start working on it. So the chain is actually action, inspiration, motivation.
Okay.
Just doing something, anything even small, even badly, like writing 200 crappy words. That action itself can spark inspiration, which then builds motivation. And if just doing the thing becomes your metric for success, then failure doesn't seem so scary. It's just part of the process, another action taken.
That's very practical. I like that. But then Manson takes us somewhere even deeper, applying these ideas to the biggest truth of all, and then you die.
Yeah. Heavy stuff.
He shares this incredibly moving story about his friend Josh dying tragically at 19 after jumping off a cliff at a party. He says that experience completely changed his life. It snapped him out of bad habits and gave him this urgent sense of purpose to actually live. Someone else's death, paradoxically, gave him permission to really live.
It's profound, and it connects directly to the work of Ernest Becker, who wrote The Denial of Death. Becker argued that we humans are unique because we know we're going to die. And this awareness creates a deep underlying death terror.
Okay.
So, to cope, we create what Becker called immortality projects. These are basically our attempts to create a conceptual self, a legacy, something that will live on after our physical bodies are gone through our work, our family, our impact, our values.
Our values are our immortality projects.
In a way, yes. They represent what we hope endures. And when those values or projects fail, that underlying death terror can resurface. We feel like our meaning is threatened.
Manson describes confronting this head on. He went to the Cape of Good Hope, stood right at the edge of this massive cliff.
Intentionally facing it.
Yeah. He describes the intense fear, the physical sensations, and then the sudden overwhelming feeling, euphoric and blinding, of just being alive, very alive.
Wow.
He argues that really confronting mortality like that obliterates all the crappy, fragile, superficial values in life. It forces you to see what actually matters.
It strips away the trivial stuff. It makes you ask the big questions. What is your legacy? How will the world be different and better when you're gone? And Manson suggests that's maybe the only question that truly matters in the end. If we avoid it, we get caught up in unimportant things.
So happiness, then, isn't just about choosing good struggles.
It's also about, as Becker and others suggested, caring about something greater than yourself. Finding your place in something larger. Entitlement, that feeling that the world owes you, actually strips that meaning away. It keeps you focused only on yourself.
It's such a strange situation we're in. Materially, many of us are better off than ever, but psychologically, maybe not so much. People feel this pressure to seem exceptional, maybe because they feel they need to, in a world that only shows the extremes.
Right. But Manson's final point is kind of comforting, in a tough love way. He says, basically, you are already great.
How so?
You're great because in the face of endless confusion and certain death, you continue to choose what to give a fuck about and what not to. Just that simple, ongoing act of choosing your values, deciding what matters to you, that already makes you significant. That makes you successful in a way, even if you don't always feel it.
Even if you're struggling.
Even if you're struggling. That process of choosing a value, that's where the real substance of life is found. That's what allows you to face everything else, including the end, with some sense of meaning and courage.